Hey, Andrew here from The Investor's Way, and welcome to Woody's Weekly Wisdom, episode number 45. And today we're looking at this headline, which says a strange $50 billion move amid cost of living crisis. And so I saw this headline and I thought, what the heck could be this strange $50 billion move? What is this all about? And then I proceeded to read the whole story. And it is quite a fascinating read in terms of how, it appears that it's trying to suggest, like it says here, it says Australians are meant to be living on the edge, but new report shows they made a very off $50 billion move as the cost of living squeezes. So right from the very beginning, the very first word of this article is that all Australians, or Australians in general, a very large cohort of Australians, however you want to read this, it's basically saying all of us have made this $50 billion move. And in a small extent, that's probably right, because we'll go through a little bit of the article to talk about this strange move that we've supposedly made. But then you get to the very last sentence, and the writer of the article basically says it's not Australians who have made this move, but a very small subset of them. And that is where the media just continues to make these weekly wisdoms so humorous for me, but also for me to share them with you. So at the heart of it, this article is actually something that is really quite interesting when it comes to you and growing your money and growing your wealth. Because what it's saying is, for the first time in history, Australians have pumped $50 billion into their super funds. And so you can see these charts, they're very up and down. And the reason they're very up and down is because it tends to be at the end of a quarter that Australians go and pump more money into super. And, like some companies are paying super monthly and others are paying it quarterly. And so there is, little surges or, larger sums of money going at the end of each quarter. So the up and down nature of the graph is nothing more than a reflection of the fact that there's a large chunk of super contributions being made on a quarterly basis. So that's all very well and good. But here we are, we've topped the 50 billion mark for the first time ever. And so that's more reflected down here. So that's, the quarterly payments up there. And then this one is showing you where over that last quarter, we have topped the 50 billion mark. And so quite the splurge, as this article suggests. And it goes into saying, well, hang on a minute, if we're living in this era of a cost of living crisis, why is it that super is hitting these records? And it's interesting to the extent that there's a whole host of reasons for it. And this article goes on to point out the fact that the super contribution has increased and therefore employers are obligated to pay more. So obviously, if people are forced to pay more, we're going to hit new records as that happens, up from 9% just a couple of years ago to now at 10.5%. So of course that number's going to be increasing. So that's pretty obvious. Then you've got more people are employed. So if more people are employed, there's more super being paid. It makes sense that we're going to hit new records. And then it talks about the fact that people are working more hours. So if you're working more hours, you're getting paid more, and therefore employers are obligated to pay more super. So all of that clearly indicates that there's obviously going to be more super money being put away. So, of course, eventually we're going to hit records. That's just the nature of the beast when you've got all those three factors in play, irrespective of the cost of living crisis. So that's the first part. And in some degree, it's like, well, that kind of explains it all right there. But this journalist wasn't happy with those three explanations. He wanted to dig further to see what was going on. So sure enough, he digged a little bit further to see if that confirmed his analysis. And he came to the conclusion that those three factors on their own weren't the entire story. And in fact, the entire story is added to by the fact that there's a whole cohort of people who've been putting away personal contributions. So when it comes to growing your wealth, one of the most tax-effective options that we've got is to put money into super over and above our obligations. There's a great tax benefit to that. And as the article points out, if you believe you're going to live to 60, that's well worth doing. And so who doesn't believe they're going to live to 60? Of course, everybody thinks they're going to live to that age or wants to live to that age. So they're preparing for it. So large chunks of money, personal contributions of money are being put into super, which is obviously over and above those other three bullet points, is why we've hit record levels. And it keeps talking about these spikes in contributions. And it goes back and talks about that even during COVID, there were spikes in people putting money into super, which was interesting given that that was a time where people were able to take it out. So then the journalist looks at, well, how is it if we're living in a high cost environment, the cost of living is rising and people's budgets are under pressure, how is it that they're putting more money into the super on personal contributions? So I said, maybe it's because they're selling their homes and downsizing, and they're taking a chunk of that money and putting it into super. But when he dug into that, he discovered that the number of sales has been declining. And so it's not, you can't lay blame as such or cause reason for it being that it's from a sale of property. So that didn't support the argument. So then they kept looking for, well, what could this possibly be? And so they start digging into all the different demographics of people in terms of, who's got what, men versus women, and all this, all our balances, and to see who's putting money away. And obviously, the older you get, the more your balance in super is going to be. And so that, that just confirms what everybody knows. A little bit of fluff in there about, if you're at 30 years of age and you've got a certain amount of money in super, then you're doing better than average. That's great, all very helpful. Not really explaining much to do with what this supposedly 50 billion move was that people had made, the headline indicated. And even admits that averages can be misleading. Of course they can, because statistics will tell you whatever you want them to tell you. And so he's continued on this, this story of how much people have in all the different decades. And so that's all well and good. And, if you're interested in knowing where you sit in terms of the median, well, that's a good thing to have a look at, I guess. But again, nothing really, explaining this supposed $50 billion move that Australians, remember, it's Australians have made this move. And so then we come down to his conclusions, and that is that the pension isn't going anywhere at this point except up. So, and the reason that he's come to that conclusion is that most people don't have enough in their super to fund their retirement, and they vote. I'm not sure why that came to be part of this article, but one thing is for sure is the majority of Australians do not have enough money in their super in order to support their retirement. So that is, at least that's one good point that they've made. And then he says, if you've heard people say you need $1 million in super to be able to retire comfortably, their standards for comfort must be higher than most people. I don't know how he comes to that, but at the end of the day, even $1 million in super is not necessarily going to generate you the type of return that would enable you to live the lifestyle you want to for the length of time you're going to be in retirement. And so, keeps saying, and then comes to the conclusion after all of that, says, sure, putting money into super is one of the smartest things that you can do because you pay less tax. And if there it is there, if you're confident you're going to live to 60, then you'll get it back. What a ridiculous thing to say. But at this point, I don't think he's really explained that what this move that Australians are making, because right at the end, he says one thing we can say is that the big lift in personal contributions is probably down to a small group of wealthy people. They'll be the ones driving new Mercedes in retirement. So right up the top, let's go all the way back up to the top where the article started with Australians. Australians are meant to be living on the edge, but new report shows they made a very off $50 billion move as the cost of living squeezes. So we're supposed to believe it was all of us, and then we get all the way to the bottom, and the article basically says it wasn't all of us. It, in fact, was just a small group of wealthy people putting in extra to their super. And the fact that we hit a record for the quarter was because of all these other factors, like the contributions that employers have to make has gone up. There's more employment, and people are working more hours because of the cost of living crisis, and not because we made any strange move. It's just we were living. And so a classic example for Woody's Weekly Wisdom of a journalist using, well, I should pause there. It's not the journalist's fault in this case, because the journalist doesn't actually write the headline. It's the senior editor who comes up with the headline for the story. And they're, again, looking for clicks. And so they got a click from me because of this strange $50 billion move that I thought I'd made, and that you had made as well. And it turns out that it wasn't any strange move that any of us has made. It was just a fact that we're working more, there's more employment, and the super contribution levy has increased over time. And therefore, of course, we're going to hit records. And by the way, a small group of wealthy people have been topping up their super as well. So all I want you to take from this article is that, yes, money going into your super is at high levels because of those factors. But on top of that, if you have capacity, one of the things you can do to minimize the drain on your dollar is to put some, from taxes, is to put it into super. Take advantage of those lower tax rates and those concessions for personal contributions. If you can, and it's appropriate to your strategy, then obviously there's benefits in doing that. And in a very warped, strange way, I think that's what this journalist was actually trying to say. But let's not beat up on the journalist too much. The editor's come up with a completely weird headline just to get us all to have a look at it, and sure enough, I did. So they worked. But in terms of my message to you for this weekly wisdom, episode 45, that is if you have the capacity, one of the ways to accelerate your growth in your wealth is to take advantage of the super contribution concessions for personal contributions over and above the guarantee, to take advantage of those tax benefits and get some more money into super and get it growing for you in super. It is dependent on where you are in your cycle of growth, and whether or not you're approaching retirement or not. So consider all of those factors before making that decision. So that's Woody's Weekly Wisdom, episode 45 for this week. Hope you have a great week. And if you're watching this video on YouTube, make sure you hit the little bell up there to get notified when they come out, and smash the subscribe button so that you can get more and more of these, and we can share these this channel with more and more people. And if you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, hit the like, the share, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought, and that way we can spread the good news and help more and more people get better understanding of their wealth and how they can maximize their wealth, like today's super conversation. So have a great week. We'll see you again next week. Cheers.